On the edge of the desolate moors in Yorkshire, surrounded by twisted, gnarled trees, stood Blackthorn Manor. The house had long been abandoned, its windows dark and lifeless, the walls covered in ivory that seemed to creep as if the house itself were alive. The manor had once belonged to the Hawthorne family, wealthy landowners whose reputation was steeped in mystery and fear. No one in the nearby village had set foot in the manor for decades, not since the last of the Hawthorns disappeared under strange circumstances. The story of Blackthorn Manor was a tale of sorrow and madness. The last known member of the family, Lady Evelyn Hawthorn, was said to be a woman both beautiful and cruel. It was said that she had locked herself away in the manor, refusing to see anyone, her once gilded beauty fading with each passing year. The villagers spoke of strange noises coming from the house, tapping on the windows at night, whispers that carried through the wind, and most chilling of all, the faint sound of a woman weeping. But it wasn't just the sounds that terrified the villagers. It was the look of the manor itself. The house was shaped oddly, as if it had been built with some dark purpose in mind. Its many windows, with some so high they seemed to touch the sky, while others were set deep into the walls. Its tower twisted and turned, and the iron gates at the entrance were rusted with age, their spikes bent and jagged as though some violent force had twisted them out of shape. It was a cold autumn evening, just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, that Jill, a young journalist from London, arrived in the village. She had heard whispers of Blackthorn Manor and its haunted past, and even the skeptic, she decided to investigate. She believed that the tale of Lady Evelyn was nothing more than superstition, a story to frighten children, nothing more. But she was determined to uncover the truth behind the manor. The locals, upon hearing of her intentions, were quick to warn her. "Stay away from the manor, miss," one of the old men at the village pub pleaded. "There's something wrong about that place. It's cursed, you see. No good has ever come from entering Blackthorn." But Jill, intrigued and eager to make her mark with a sensational story, brushed off their warnings. "It's just an old house, full of ghosts and forgotten tales," she said with a laugh. "I'm sure it's just a bit of local folklore." Ignoring their fearful glances, she made her way to the manor. The following morning, as Jill approached the towering gates, an uneasy feeling crawled up her spine. The air around the manor was thick with mist. The gates creaked open, as if inviting her in. The path leading to the house was overgrown with brambles and wild plants, their twisted vines almost seeming to reach out for her as she walked. The manor loomed ahead, dark and imposing. It was even more menacing up close than she had imagined. Its windows were like vacant eyes staring into nothingness. The door was made of heavy oak, its surface worn and scarred, and opened without a sound as Jill pushed it gently. Inside, the air was stale and thick, as though it hadn't been disturbed in years. Dust covered every surface, and the walls were lined with faded portraits of the Hawthorne family. Jill could feel the weight of their gazes, as if they were slightly judging her, daring her to uncover their secrets. She explored the main hall, taking note of the grand staircase that spiraled upwards into shadow, and the long corridors that seemed to stretch into infinity. The house was eerily silent, save for the occasional creak of wood beneath her feet. But then, just as she passed a doorway at the end of the hallway, she heard it. Almost imperceivable sound, like a woman weeping. It was faint at first, but it grew louder, more distant, and Jill's heart skipped a beat. She followed the sound, her steps tentative as she made her way deeper into the manor. The cry led her to a small, darkened room at the far end of the house, its door half open. Jill hesitated for a moment before pushing the door wide. Inside, the room was cold, the air damp and heavy. At the centre of the room stood a full-length mirror, its surface covered in dust. The weeping sound was coming from the mirror, echoing softly. As Jill stepped closer, she noticed something strange. The reflection in the glass was not her own. Instead, it was the image of a woman, pale and gaunt, dressed in black, her hair hanging limp and tangled around her face. Her eyes were hollow, her lips twisted into a silent scream. Jill stumbled back in shock, her breath catching in her throat. She reached out a trembling hand towards the mirror, but the reflection of the woman suddenly moved, her mouth opening in a silent wail. The sound of her crying grew deafening, a mournful, heart-wrenching sob that seemed to fill the entire room. Before Jill could react, the reflection reached out from the mirror. The woman's long, bony fingers grasped Jill's wrist with an unnatural strength. Pulling her forward, Jill screamed, but no sound came out. The woman's face twisted into an expression of malice, and Jill felt an icy chill seep into her skin, her body freezing as though the woman's touch had drained the warmth from her very soul. Desperate, Jill yanked herself free from the mirror's grasp and stumbled backwards, her legs shaking. The room around her seemed to darken, the walls closing in as the weeping grew louder, filling her mind, drowning out everything else. As Jill turned to flee, the mirror shattered behind her with a defying crash. She ran through the halls, gasping for every breath she could make. But every door she reached was locked, every window sealed tight. The house had become a maze, and the shadows in the corners seemed to shift and twist, as if they were alive, following her every move. Finally, in a panic-stricken frenzy, Jill found the front door and tore it open, rushing out into the fog-filled yard. The cold air hit her like a slap to the face, but the sound of weeping still echoed in her ears. The village was quiet when she returned, the locals watching her eyes full of pity and fear. She was never the same after that night, her once bright eyes now hollow and distant, her face pale and gaunt, as though she had seen something that no one should ever see. She spoke little, only muttering fragments of a story no one could understand. They say that Lady Evelyn Hawthorne's spirit still haunts Blackthorn Manor, trapped in the glass of the mirror where she had once wept for her lost family. And though the manor stands abandoned, its gates creaking in the wind, the cry of the woman's sorrow can still be heard, floating on the air, waiting for the next curious soul to uncover its dark secrets. But those who hear the weeping, those who venture too close to the manor, never return the same.